Imagine getting the invitation of a lifetime. A king is throwing a wedding feast for his son. Not just any feast, the biggest event the kingdom has ever seen. Tables stacked with food, wine flowing, music, dancing, the whole 9 yards, and you're invited. Not because you earned it, not because you're royalty, you just got the invite. So the king sends his servants out to tell everyone, "Come on, it's ready, everything's set." And here's where it gets uncomfortable. People start making excuses. One guy says he's got a farm to check on, another says he's got business to close, and this is part that should stop you cold. Some of them grab the king's servants and kill them just for delivering the invitation. The king is furious. He sends his army, wipes out those murderers, and then does something wild. He tells his servants to go out into the streets and invite anyone. Good, bad, rich, poor, doesn't matter. Fill the wedding hall, he says. So they do. The place is packed, full house, every seat taken. Then the king walks in to see his guests and spots one man not wearing wedding clothes, just came as he was. And the king asks him, "Friend, how did you get in here without wedding clothes?" The man has nothing to say, and the king has him removed, thrown out into the darkness. And that's when Jesus drops the line that's confused people for 2,000 years, "For many are called, but few are chosen." Now stick with me because most people get this verse completely backwards. It's not about God being stingy with his invitations. It's about something way more personal, way more convicting, and honestly, way more relevant to you than you might think. Here's how most people read this verse. And honestly, it's kind of terrifying if you read it wrong. They think Jesus is saying God calls a lot of people, but he only picks a tiny, lucky few to actually get in. Like some kind of divine lottery where most people lose no matter what they do. That reading makes God sound random, arbitrary, like he's playing favorites and there's nothing you can do about it either way. But that's not what's happening in this parable at all. Go back and look at the story again. The king didn't limit the invitations. He didn't handpick a small VIP list. He told his servants to go out and invite everyone, good and bad alike. The invitation wasn't exclusive. It was as wide open as it could possibly be. So if the call was for everybody, what determined who actually got kicked out? It wasn't random. It was one specific thing, the wedding clothes. Here's something most modern viewers don't know, but everyone listening to Jesus in that culture would have understood immediately. In that time period, it was actually customary for a king hosting a feast like this to provide the wedding garments for his guests. You didn't need to own a fancy outfit to attend. The king supplied it, free of charge, at the door. So when this man shows up without wedding clothes, he's not being punished for being poor. He's not being punished for not having the right outfit in his own closet. He's being confronted because he refused the garment that was freely offered to him. He walked into that banquet hall on his own terms, wearing his own clothes, saying without saying it out loud, "I don't need what you're offering. I'm fine as I am." That's the whole key to this parable. It's not about whether you show up. It's about whether you show up on your terms or on the king's terms. This is where the difference between called and chosen finally makes sense. Being called means you receive the invitation. Every single person in that culture, every person who's ever heard the gospel, honestly has been called. The invitation goes out wide. God isn't stingy with it, but being chosen, or more accurately, being someone who actually belongs at the feast, means you responded to that invitation the way it was meant to be received. Humbly, on the king's terms, not your own. You accepted what was freely given instead of showing up assuming your own effort, your own status, or your own goodness was enough to get you a seat. Now here's the part that makes this parable so uncomfortable, and honestly why Jesus told it in the first place. He wasn't telling this story to outsiders. He was telling it to the religious leaders, the priests, the Pharisees, the people who were absolutely certain they already had a seat reserved at God's table. Think about who actually got removed from the feast in this story. It wasn't someone who never showed up. It wasn't someone who rejected the invitation outright, like the people who killed the servants. It was someone who walked in, sat down, looked completely at home, and still got removed. That should terrify anyone who's ever assumed they're good with God just because they go to church, grew up religious, or feel spiritually comfortable. This parable isn't a warning to people far from God. It's a warning to people who think they're close to Him. There's a psychological trap here that's incredibly common, and it doesn't just apply to religion, it applies to life in general. The trap is called moral licensing. Basically, the more confident you feel about your own goodness or status, the less likely you are to actually examine yourself honestly. The Pharisees weren't outsiders. They were insiders who stopped checking their own hearts because they assumed their position guaranteed their standing. That's exactly the danger Jesus is pointing at. Showing up to the feast isn't the finish line. It's not even close. What matters is whether you're wearing what the king gave you, or whether you walked in still trusting in your own version of good enough. Let's bring this all the way home, because this isn't just an ancient wedding parable, it's describing something that happens in people's hearts constantly, even today. Plenty of people consider themselves invited. They believe in God. Maybe they were raised in church. Maybe they pray sometimes. Maybe they just generally consider themselves good people who'll be fine when it's all said and done. That's the RSVP. That's showing up to the banquet hall. But the wedding garment represents something deeper: humility, receiving grace instead of relying on your own resume. It's the difference between saying, God, I've lived a decent life, I've done my part, and saying, God, I have absolutely nothing to offer you except my need for what you're giving me. The man without the garment probably felt just as comfortable in that room as everyone else. Maybe more comfortable, honestly, because he trusted himself. And that's exactly what makes this parable so unsettling. It's not a story about outsiders getting rejected. It's a story about someone who looked completely fine on the outside, right up until the king looked closer. So here's the real question this parable is asking you. Right now, today, are you resting on the fact that you were called, that you show up, that you believe the basics, that you're in the room, or have you actually received what was freely offered? Have you traded your own version of good enough for the covering that was given to you? No. Strings attached? So let's finally answer the question we started with. Many are called, few are chosen. Isn't God being stingy? It's not a divine lottery. The call goes out to everyone. That part was never in question. And the king in this story goes out of his way to make sure the invitation reaches anyone willing to come. What's rare isn't the invitation. What's rare is the humility to actually receive it the way it was meant to be received, not on your own terms, not trusting your own righteousness, but wearing what was freely given. Many hear the invitation. Many even show up. But the ones who are truly chosen, truly at home in that banquet hall, are the ones who let go of their own version of good enough and accepted what the king offered instead. If this parable hit different watching it just now, that's exactly the point. This isn't a story to make you anxious about whether you're one of the few. It's an invitation to stop showing up on your own terms and actually receive what's already being offered to you freely, right now. Drop a comment. I want to know, did you always think this verse meant something different before today? And if you want more videos that dig into the parables everybody quotes but nobody fully unpacks, hit subscribe, because next week we're going even deeper into one of Jesus' hardest teachings. God bless, and I'll see you in the next one.